Rudy's revelation.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
You can't handle the truth.
What's up? Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. It is Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. So in the news today, Alejandro Mayorkas, the former head of the Department of Homeland Security, got his security clearance revoked by Donald Trump, along with Biden and a slew of other Democrats. We're going to get into this news and more coming up right now. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. All right, let's get into the headlines. We're going to start out with the New York Post and this story that was breaking. Pete Hegseth claims nobody was texting war plans in first comments since the Yemen strike group text scandal. And if you weren't really sure what this was all about or what the app is Signal, and it's an encrypted text application. So, it's good to use. I use it for some things. So he was texting in a working group. Pete Hegseth was. But it looks like the culprit was Mike Waltz, who accidentally added the editor of the Atlantic magazine, which is a far left progressive magazine, to the chat. And so they were discussing apparently specific strike plans on the Houthi rebels, but this is of no consequence. Why? Because unless the Atlantic editor is leaking targeting information to the Houthis or to Iran, I don't think that's really much of an issue. The fact that he made it public shows what the real damage was. Going back to the headlines, the Post Millennial also has the headline, Pete Hegseth says Atlantic editor-in-chief peddles in garbage. In response to the report, Jeffrey Goldberg was inadvertently added a top-secret Signal chat. As President Trump said, the attacks on the Houthis have been highly successful and effective. President Trump continues to have the utmost confidence in his national security team, including National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Also, this week, there was that dust-up about whether Elon Musk was going to be shared attack plans for China. All this, I think, is making mountains out of molehills to some extent, for the reasoning being is that we're not sure exactly what kind of briefing Elon Musk was going to receive and why. But that's an executive decision, so it doesn't really matter whether Elon Musk is briefed or not on whatever. The commander-in-chief is the commander-in-chief, and he gets to decide. As far as this Atlantic leak from Signal, there was no consequence really to the attacks. And so it's not like if we were attacking, let's say, China, the communist Chinese, or Iran itself, and we're about to initiate a surprise attack, and the surprise was undermined by this leak. So it has little consequence except politically. Jeff Goldberg is a far left progressive lunatic who poses as a journalist. Post-millennial goes on to say Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was asked about the Atlantic's editor-in-chief report that he was inadvertently added to a group chat alongside senior Trump administration officials where strikes against Houthi rebels were discussed on the tarmac in Hawaii. Hegseth told reporters nobody was texting war plans and that Jeffrey Goldberg is a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist. He's not really a journalist, who has made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again. He's a biased progressive. And if you ever looked at Jeffrey Goldberg in any of his interviews or reports or any of the times he's appeared on television, he's an anti-Trumper, which of course makes him suspect. Why you would add a reporter to an app that you're using to discuss inter-office issues, I don't know. You could certainly have just added him to your text app. There's no reason that needs to be why you're having secure communications or encrypted communications with an opposing party news outlet. That's what worries me. Was this something done intentionally by the Atlantic editor who reached out to Walsh via Signal? Might be. I only have 3 people I use Signal with, nobody else. It's not a general text app for me. I have other text apps to just communicate in general with other people, but I don't want to say classified, but for hush-hush things, I only have 3 or 4 people on Signal I communicate with. All right, so next headline up is from the Federalist. Trump isn't defying the courts, he's defending the Constitution. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan has blocked the EPA from terminating $14 billion in climate grants awarded by the Biden administration, funds now sitting in a Citibank account. Judge Anna Rehas has ordered the military not to enforce Trump's ban on trans-identifying service members. These rulings were not mere disagreements, as Chief Justice John Roberts claimed last week when he rejected Trump's call to impeach a judge who ruled against his deportation policies. They are direct assaults on the president's constitutional power. Indeed. This is, by the way, there have been sporadic instances of stuff like this going on, but this is really is unprecedented. The amount of left-wing activist judges, and that's exactly what they are, and we're going to get into that in just a second, that have teamed up with left-wing Democratic lawyers and then decided to issue a stay, block, or injunction on the policies of the President of the United States. This is not the Supreme Court. Really, the President of the United States should only answer to the Supreme Court, but I'm not going to get into that right here. Since January 20th, the pattern of politically motivated judicial overreach has emerged. Chutkan's decision overrides Trump's executive authority. Another headline from the New York Post: Trump yanks Secret Service protection for ex-DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. And this follows from a few days ago, where Trump revoked security clearance for Joe Biden, the entire family, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, and other political foes. And they try to make it sound, even the New York Post try to make it sound like this is political, as much as it is, and I've said this over and over and over again, the uprooting of the tentacles of the progressive liberal machine, the deep state, the administrative state, that there's so many people that are involved in what I think is a cult, but is certainly a conspiracy. And as I've always said, socialism, communism, Marxism is a conspiracy. The whole idea of spreading it, and in a lot of instances, doing so secretly makes it a conspiracy. So leftism, progressivism in the United States is not much different. It's reinvented socialism under the guise of postmodernism. And so they never wave red flags with a hammer and sickle, or, pump their fists in the air, workers of the world unite type of thing. It's very done hush hush. But when you get behind closed doors, the idea of neoliberalism and the pursuit of pushing a socialist global order is very apparent. Headline from the National Review: Trump announces 25% tariff on countries buying oil from Venezuela. Again, there's a series of moves he's making to target, the Trump administration, to target communist countries. One is Venezuela. The regime is very belligerent toward the United States, antagonistic almost, as is Cuba, and softening ideas against nation states that are politically or ideologically the opposite of the United States has to be rooted out. The international globalism, which is really just a front for the spreading, I should say, the propagating of socialist propaganda and the like. Basically, there aren't going to be any more jobs because of technology, and so you should just accept the socialist global socialist state, and so you can get your stipend. Headline here from the Washington Times: Trump administration cancels at least 68 grants focused on LGBTQ health questions. Now, the idea here is the fact that I have nothing against people that are homosexual or identify as trans, or you do whatever you want to do as an adult. I don't have any problem with that. What I do have a problem with, as people don't seem to realize, is that, or the gay community realizes, is that the pushing of LGBTQ lifestyle culture is subversive. For the simple reason is it aggravates people that don't agree with that lifestyle. Not that there's anything wrong with the lifestyle, but they've tested it out, as particularly the trans issue, as pushing things that people just can't deal with. And whether it's in culture and politics or whatever. So in that sense, it's ideologically subversive. So, as I have no problem with the lifestyle, whatever you do in your private life is up to you. But pushing it in schools and pushing it into communities that don't agree with it is in itself divisive. So that's the point of it. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but when you tell people they don't even just need to tolerate it, but you need to accept it, or to an excessive degree, you need to promote it. So, and I don't think, as with abortion, that your tax dollars should be going to things that are divisive or that you might not necessarily believe in, aside from the military. For the simple reason that's the charge of the federal government, is to protect the United States. So there's no charge for the federal government to foster LGBTQ lifestyles here and abroad. That's not the responsibility. Now, if you want to have private groups to do it, great, but I don't know why millions of dollars of taxpayer money has to go there. So moving on, from the article by Carla Johnson, last week the U.S. government terminated at least 68 grants to 46 institutions, totaling nearly $40 million when awarded. Some of the grant money has already been spent, but at least $1.36 million in future support was yanked as a result of the cuts, a significant undercount because estimates were available for less than a third of the grants. So they don't have all the data involved in these sort of grants. But still, whether it's trans people or gay people or lumberjacks or furries or whatever special interest group shouldn't be receiving taxpayer dollars to promote and foster and nurture their lifestyles. All right, let's get to the judges here. Just the News is reporting this is a problem. Boasberg attended anti-Trump org's event, spurs calls to ban judicial junkets. Now, this is the Just the News story, which goes on to say Boasberg attended a privately funded legal conference in Idaho that featured sponsors and speakers who have expressed clear anti-Trump sentiments, particularly on the immigration and January 6th. And a theme echoed the Democratic Party's 2024 stated mission of saving democracy. Federal ethics rules currently allow such junkets. Now, I don't have a problem with this, with allowing such junket. What I have a problem with is masking the intent here, which is a partisan intent. It's politically partisan, right? And that's the problem. When you start having judicial appointments or whatever with people that are on the left or on the right, they should just be good judges. And the reason is because we've been having this war for some time, not just in the Supreme Court, but in all federal positions. They've been drawn into camps. You're either a liberal or you're conservative. And the point is, when you're sitting on the bench, you should be apolitical. But that's not the case here, especially if you're going to junkets, probably that taxpayer dollars pay for you to go get further indoctrinated by your leash holders about how to act and how to render verdicts, etc., court decisions. And then the PGA Media also has this headline: new dirt on Judge Boasberg raises more questions. District Court judge who recently blocked President Donald Trump's efforts to deport a legal alien gang member attended a suspiciously partisan legal conference just months before his ruling. According to a judicial ethics report, Judge James Boasberg, so this is before his ruling, so he could have very well have been coached on how to rule. Judge James Boasberg, who serves on the D.C. District Court, participated in what appears to be nothing more than a Democratic strategy session masquerading as a legal conference in Sun Valley, Idaho. The conference's agenda items, Judges in Democracy and a State of Democracy, alluding to the fact that it's run by the Democrat Party, sounded eerily similar to the Democrats' tiresome 2024 campaign rhetoric about saving democracy. And that's always the issue, is like, democracy is a process. Okay, this is a republic. Okay, it's a democratic republic, but democracy is a process in which we staff the republic with representatives of the people. So Just the News also goes on to say 2 GOP congressmen slap articles of impeachment on federal judges for being partisan activists. In this article by Therese Boudreaux, Representative Andy Ogles of Tennessee, obviously a Republican, filed impeachment articles Monday against U.S. District Judge Theodore Chuang from Maryland, who had ruled that Trump's massive cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development were likely unconstitutional and imposed a partial preliminary injunction. You don't know if it's unconstitutional? You said it's likely unconstitutional. And a preliminary injunction is all they could really do. They can't rule that it's unconstitutional because it's not. And as we heard from the Federalist, Trump is actually acting constitutionally and the judges aren't. So that's the only thing they could do is put in a stay. They can't rule because it's executive privilege, that the commander-in-chief gets to do a lot. There's a lot of leeway in how the president gets to act. So, and especially, obviously, he has to listen to the Supreme Court, but lower court federal judges that, are asked or sued, or cases are brought before them by other progressive groups to try to get this judge to block the agenda of the duly elected president of the United States. So the Democrats lost, and what they're trying to do is to hobble Trump, just like they did in his first term, using it by any means necessary. And in this case, I believe unconstitutionally. U.S. District Court Judge John McConnell Jr. from Rhode Island is also facing possible removal after Representative Andrew Clyde, Republican of Georgia, filed articles of impeachment against him also on Monday. This activist judge is guilty of abuse of power and conflicts of interest, Clyde said on X. Corrupt Judge McConnell, who stands to benefit from his own injunction, is attempting to block President Trump's freeze and review of federal funds, waste, fraud, and abuse. And they keep saying, it's like they did during the 2020 election. There's no fraud. And they do that here too. There's no waste, fraud, and abuse. It's only $1 million. Well, $1 million is still a lot of money to a lot of people. And if you had to pay $1 million in taxes and that money was being put to something that you find wasteful, Washington Times, judge tells State Department to keep funding refugee assistance programs. I said this often, is that once the money is appropriated by Congress, you have to spend it. So unless the need no longer exists, as with some of the COVID money they're trying to claw back, you can claw back things, particularly if they were appropriated by an administration and then never spent because there's really no need. And that's what causes inflation. So, but this article goes on to say, Judge Jamal Whitehead said the government has great leeway in spending decisions, but it can't curtail spending to the point that a program can no longer carry out the task Congress assigned it in the law. Well, I don't know if it assigned tax. It's not the way a legislation works. There's a brief descriptor in the bills that so-and-so money is for loosely this and is going to be awarded to these NGOs or these organizations or so-and-so to do X, Y, Z, but they're never really that specific. I mean, depends what you consider specific. Or headlines from Zero Hedge. Well, let's get to the crux of the matter here. Who controls the administrative state? So, what are we talking about here is Department of Education. Trump ordered on March 20th, the Secretary of Education shall, to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education. Now, I've been wrong on this issue because I was under the impression that the Department of Education was created by Jimmy Carter by an executive order. Apparently, it was, and then it was made into law by Congress that same year. The story goes on to say, the public mind has never had a great love for bureaucracies. Consistent with Max Weber's worry, they have put a society in the impenetrable iron cage built of bloodless rationalism, needling edicts, corporatist corruption, and never-ending empire building, checked by neither budgetary constraint nor plebiscite. That's us. And my point here is that even if you're a Democrat, you should want this to happen. There will probably never, ever be another time in history that will allow the American people to go into the federal government and strip away the fat, for lack of a better word. The article goes on to say the edifice of compulsion and control is incredibly huge. No one can agree precisely on how many agencies there are or how many people work for them, case in point, much less how many institutions and individuals work on contract for them, which is one removed, NGOs, etc., either directly or indirectly, and then it's just a public face. The subterranean branch is far more elusive, and that's when I talked about all the progressive, postmodern, neoliberal roots that have grown into the bureaucracy and wound themselves inextricably into the bureaucracy that they can't be pulled out without damaging the agencies themselves. And that's why people are like, get rid of the agency. And then, of course, you have these unconstitutional judges trying to muck up the whole process of ripping these tentacles out of federal government. All right, let's move on to Epstein. All right, Epstein files. It seems to be a bit of a canard at this point. Is the client list real? Does it still exist? The PJ Media is saying the real Epstein files are coming. Here's what to know. And I went through the article, it didn't say anything. It basically said, Pam Bondi said to Maria Bartiromo, oh, they're coming. It's very careful. We need to be very careful of what we release. Bullshit. It's more stalling tactics. And then what are you going to re-release things we already know? It doesn't make any sense. Wall Street Journal also has the headline, the FBI pushes to release Epstein files with some details on victims' witnesses left in. Well, I thought that was the whole reason for the delay. Officials, victims, lawyers worry sensitive information will be exposed in Trump administration's eagerness to release material. There needs to be a comprehensive report detailing the activities of Epstein. It needs to be done by the FBI and the federal government. What has been done to date is unacceptable. We don't know anything about what he was doing genetically in New Mexico, his science experiments, not to mention his abuse of young women, preteen and teen girls, I should say, for the most part. We don't know to what extent. Whether or not he was involved in intelligence gathering, blackmail operations, etc., honeypot, we don't know. It's just, Jeffrey Epstein, a financier, was caught with underage girls. Come on. You know, this isn't, who is that rapper? I forget who that rapper was. The guy that, had a penchant for 14-year-old girls. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something completely different. All right, moving along. New York Post. Pennsylvania city worker accused of staging hate crime hoax after allegedly planting noose at her own desk. Well, how does this sound familiar? Doesn't. Allentown City Hall employee. It doesn't say what you did. LaTarsha Brown was charged with a pair of criminal counts after DNA pulled from the noose only belonged to her, according to authorities said. And she says she's innocent. Brown initially said she made the shocking discovery at her desk on January 10th when she arrived for work. Right, it was before Trump's inauguration. You obviously see the political connection here, leading to an investigation and a community protest. And it turns out a lot of these hate crimes, that's what I'm saying, like neo-Nazis are hard to find. You got to go into the woods of Idaho or Tennessee or somewhere to find a handful of neo-Nazis or real racists, people so racist enough that they're going to put a noose either in a garage or on somebody's desk or put it around someone's neck. This is MAGA country. The article goes on to say, every employee agreed to DNA testing except for Ms. Brown. Initially cooperative, Ms. Brown requested that the investigation be discontinued. Well, why would she say that? Brown's DNA was finally obtained via a court order in January, and it matched up with the DNA found on the inner knotted portion, which means she tied it an outer surface of the noose. In other words, she didn't just pick it up at her desk and that's how her DNA got on there. It was in the interior of the noose, which means she tied the noose. She allegedly made vague statements and gave deceptive answers. Why would you do that? And this is just the same thing with the Jussie Smollett thing. They want attention. They want to move a political narrative. And so they get caught in their own charade. More closures. Trump administration to close long COVID offices despite RFK Jr.'s pledge to fund research. This is from Just the News. The Trump administration is looking to close down its Health and Human Services office devoted to researching long COVID. The closure is part of the Trump administration's broader reorganization of the federal government, where each department is conducting its own restructuring to minimize costs and maximize effectiveness. Now, what's the issue with long COVID? Well, I don't know if Trump just wants to gloss over the problems with the vaccine, or maybe it's not related to the vaccine. The problem with the manufactured virus, it is manufactured virus, is its ability, its long-term detriment to health. And the reasoning being is the production of the spike protein and proteins within the body. And then apparently the vaccine sort of does the same thing. So if you got infected, you got a problem with the virus. Replicate. The virus itself doesn't replicate. It's the proteins replicate in your body, causing long-term problems. We're not even really sure how it affects long-term, affects your cell structure, and you know, whether your longevity is going to be affected. It seems like it might, particularly with the vaccine. It's hard to say for the vaccine or whether it's COVID. But they are deleterious effects to your health. Whether you got sick with COVID-2 or had the vaccine for it, most of the people that got the vaccine for it ended up getting sick. I don't know, and I mean with COVID, and I don't know anybody who hasn't gotten COVID yet. So the problem with COVID particularly was that it was manufactured, but also the virality, the ability for it to spread was significant, because you don't have to be exposed to a lot of the virus to get sick. Fox News is reporting Trump claims Bezos fretted to him about out-of-control people at the Washington Post. Trump has praised billionaire owner in recent weeks. They actually did a couple of bad articles on him. Bezos, Trump said in an interview with Outkick's Clay Travis, he said, "It's crazy. I lose my fortune running this thing." And they, Post newsroom employees, you know, they're out of control. These people are crazy. They're crazy people. They're out of control. And that's what Trump said. That we don't know exactly what Bezos said. I think people are having either a revelatory moment, but people that are in the cult, they have confirmation bias, and I'm subject to confirmation bias a little bit myself, but the only reason is I can't believe anything the liberals say because they're so out there, and a lot of times, even if you check on things they say, it's either not true or it's a gross exaggeration, or they play word games to forward their narrative, but it's really mischaracterizing facts and statements. More from Fox News. NASA reveals astronauts' return would not have happened without Trump's intervention. NASA's ready to get to work on the president's ambitious space agenda. But the article goes on to say, NASA spokeswoman Bethany Stevens credited President Donald Trump for securing the return of 2 astronauts stranded for more than 9 months on the International Space Station. In an exclusive interview with Fox News Digital, Stevens said the mission to rescue astronauts Barry Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, was a huge win for the Trump administration. And she goes on to say it probably wouldn't have happened without him, without his intervention. Yeah, here it is. This is a huge win for the Trump administration and would not have happened without President Trump's intervention, more than likely. We know that Joe Biden delayed the rescue, and it was a rescue, because it would have affected the Democrats politically. Just the news again, RNC election integrity advocates secure legal victories in election cases across several states. This is big. Republican National Committee and election integrity advocates have won court cases this month across 5 states regarding elections, from GOP-led Georgia to Democrat-led state of Washington. In Arizona, the RNC, Arizona GOP, and the Yavapai County Republican Party sued Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, alleging that he violated state law when he adopted the 2023 Election Procedures Manual. Yep. In Georgia, labor union represented by Democratic election lawyer filed a lawsuit in October 2023 against the Fulton County Registration Elections Board and the Georgia State Elections Board. There was a lot of news around that, challenging the state's deadline. That is found to be dismissed. Maryland, restoring integrity and trust in elections, sued the Maryland State Board of Elections in January 2024 over a regulation that prevented 2 citizen activists from conducting investigations and whether the state was removing registrations from non-residents, whether they were or whether they weren't. New York, a New York law that allowed non-citizens to vote, I reported on this previously, has been declared unconstitutional. In Washington State, Democratic law firm Perkins Coie filed a lawsuit in November 2022 on behalf of the Vet Voice Foundation, the Washington Bus, and El Centro de la Raza, you know them, and 3 voters against the Washington Secretary of State, the King County Elections Director, a member of King County Canvassing Board, over the state's signature verification process for mail-in ballots, because they don't want signature verification because it's found that a lot of the stuff is fraudulent. On March 6th, the Washington Supreme Court upheld the state's signature verification process. More headlines from the Federalist. Kiss goodbye to the GOP House majority if Susan Crawford wins Wisconsin Supreme Court race, I should say. Time-sensitive chance to put 2 more House seats in play for 2026 read the subject line of an email advertising a donor advisor's briefing where liberal Supreme Court candidate Susan Crawford spoke. The email added that Crawford's victory could also result in Democrats winning half the seats needed to win control over the House in 2026. As unethically partisan as this appeal sounds for a nonpartisan judicial candidate, the email's authors are not wrong. And I talked about this yesterday about how important this is, and that's why Elon Musk is sinking all this money into this race, because it's political. It's about gerrymandering the districts so Republicans would never win again. Seats to the U.S. Congress. That's problematic, and election integrity efforts are being blocked, and the Republicans are trying in Wisconsin to get them in, because the voting that's going to take place in just a few days, April 1st, could be mired with fraud. But the Republicans who were trying to put election integrity in there before this vote were blocked continually by who? Judges. New York Post. Stay with me now. This is also important. Mahmoud Khalil has ties to UNRWA. On green card application, feds say they hit anti-Israeli agitator with new accusations. It's true. Mahmoud Khalil has tied to the controversial United Nations Agencies for Palestinian Refugees. It's a refugee agency. In this case, for Palestinians, lawyers of the Department of Justice lodged new accusations against the anti-Israel campus protest leader in court papers over the weekend. Khalil, a green card holder who was nabbed by U.S. ICE in New York on March 8, allegedly fraudulently applied to change his immigration status without disclosing his membership in certain organizations. Among those organizations was the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, known as UNRWA, UNRWA, a relief agency that was infamously stripped of tens of millions of dollars in federal funding after an explosive report that some of its members took part in the Hamas October 7th attack in 2023. And they were working with UNRWA in Gaza, Hamas was, and there was an intelligence conduit there that they were receiving information through the UN that was going back to Hamas. Khalil was a political affairs advisor with UNRWA from June through November 2023, right during and through the attack on Israel. The DOJ alleges that Khalil did not reveal he was working for the Syria office in the British Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon. All these things stink of an intelligence operation. So whether he's connected to bigger groups, we'll find out, but he's obviously involved in some sort of intelligence to be working for UNRWA and also in the Syria office in the British Embassy in Beirut. He's not just a kid from, Palestinian kid who's just trying to get an education at Columbia. Just leave him alone. Come on. More headlines. New York Post, bomb squad deployed as multiple incendiary devices found at Tesla leadership in Texas, says the cops. Several incendiary devices were found. Austin. Bomb squad was deployed around 8 a.m. There you go. Pam Bondi warns Representative Jasmine Crockett to tread carefully over a call to Elon Musk to be taken down. Crockett clarified her calls in action were not about violence, really. Jasmine Crockett needs to be censured immediately if there's to be any decorum with the House of Representatives or senators for that matter, because you're not just representing your district and your voters, you're also representing the United States. And that kind of belligerent talk shouldn't be tolerated. The article goes on to say Attorney Pam Bondi warned Representative Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas, to tread carefully days after the Democrat got attention from Trump allies for suggesting Elon Musk should be taken down. She's an elected public official, so she needs to tread very carefully because there's nothing will happen to Elon Musk. And we're going to fight to protect all the Tesla owners throughout the country, Tesla dealerships, etc. CNBC reports FBI launches Tesla Threats Task Force. This is domestic terrorism. The FBI has launched a new task force to investigate the attacks targeting Tesla. There have been at least 80 reported cases of vandalism and arson of Tesla vehicles in the United States and Canada, in addition to peaceful protests at Tesla showrooms. Right. There have been some very big instances of people shooting at dealerships and using Molotov cocktails to burn cars, but also lots of keying incidents. And the progressives are crazy. You are an extremist if an emotional, visceral feeling you have gets you to act against an accordance or ordinance or law. So what would drive you to key someone's car? The hatred. I remember when this whole liberal progressive movement began, it was like, we stand against hate. I still have some progressive neighbors that have we stand against hate signs. It's like, but they're the hateful ones. You're not going to have morals and ethics if you don't have any sort of spiritual tether that's going to keep you from acting immoral and unethical. Speaking of immoral and unethical, One American News, Illinois charged transgender activists ordered to stay away from all Tesla properties after vandalizing a service center. Buffalo Groves, I guess this is Chicago, Buffalo Groves, Evan Aaron L. White, a 27-year-old biological male who identifies as transgender woman, has been charged after vandalizing a newly constructed Tesla service center, and the left-wing activists has been ordered to avoid all Tesla sites from this point forward. So it's a restraining order. 27-year-old White was charged with after purportedly spray painting offensive words and phrases regarding Musk and the CEO of Tesla on the windows and walls of the Chicago area facility. Courts also stated that the phrases "Trump sold us" and "trans rights are human rights" were sprayed in white paint on the walls of Tesla Center. You know, I'm sorry. This trans rights thing is fucking bullshit. If you're a transgender person, you have non-discrimination rights just like any other minority group. That's written into law. But you don't get special rights, right? So I don't know exactly where this comes from, this special rights, that trans rights are human rights. And first of all, human rights are based on individual rights. Okay, there was this whole global thing about securing human rights worldwide. Okay, but human rights start with individual rights. Secure in your property and your person with the freedom to speak freely and worship as you wish, or not worship as you wish. That's it, right? You don't get any special rights. Right? There's no, they keep, the news media, the leftist news media keeps writing headlines, GOP attacking trans people. And it's a wordplay, and people think physically attacking when they're being attacked with words. Are they really? Or are they just being denied special privilege, and in the case of the U.S. federal government, being denied propaganda, money for propaganda, and to promulgate a certain type of lifestyle? The federal government should be funding that. In your free time, when you're not at work for the federal government or in the army or whatever it is you do, if you want to stand on a street corner or hold up a sign, trans rights or human rights, hey man, go. Right? But you're not supposed to be committing crimes and then just go, well, I'm immune because I'm trans. Postmillennial is reporting Kentucky trans activist charged with violently assaulting female partner. The suspect, Selena Marie Metz, also known as Chad Lee Metz, claimed to officers that they were having rough sex, but the victim claimed to police that Metz had repeatedly punched her in the face, used a metal piece of a fan to hit her in the face, held her down, and choked her to the point of being unable to breathe. The responding officers noted that the victim had red scratch marks and bruises to her head, face, neck, breasts, arms. And then the victim went on to say that this wasn't rough sex. We didn't even have sex. And it's just, they could have been drunk, but they were mentally impaired. You know, it's domestic violence, but you do not hit and choke people that you're in a relationship with. I think trans people could be mentally impaired. For the simple reason is, if you believe you're a woman, but you have a penis, it's not like, I know I'm a man, but I would like to be a woman. That's a different thing. I'm not going to question your motives. I'm just going to say, but if you think that inside you, there's a woman, I was born in the wrong body type of thing, that's gender dysphoria. It's mental illness. The Federalist, Snow White's weekend box office bomb proves audiences want charming. The Snow White remake opened this weekend with a lethargic $43 million domestic box office. Inflated movie budgets led the film costing $250 million to produce, meaning there's a long way to go before it even breaks even. All right, here's my problem with Snow White. Apparently, it totally diverts away from the original story. So don't even call it Snow White. Call it a revision of Snow White, whatever, because if you think you're going to go to this movie and it's going to be the Snow White, a remake of the old story, you're wrong. Second thing is, despite all the stupid, it's anti-misogynistic, feminist bullshit in the movie, they also screwed over LP actors, dwarf actors, who it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but instead of getting real actors, they use computer-generated imagery for the dwarves. So that's the problem there. But apparently, the new film bet on a boastful, ultra-modern version of Snow White that downplayed her femininity in favor of vanity and hubris. An ending perfectly encapsulates this, a spoiler. The princess does not learn to love Prince Charming, but rather ends up with a bandit named Jonathan. Pseudo Robin Hood with a painfully socialistic perspective. More propaganda. And that's what I mean by how the whole leftist movement, ever since the Jacobins, it's a conspiracy, and it acts like it's a conspiracy. It keeps its motives and its narratives and its mission clandestine. And a lot of the people that it scoops up are unwitting to the real basis for the movement. You know, they use all these, a plethora of platonic sounding mission statements about, oh, we're saving the planet, or we're defending trans people, or we're here to love, you know, whatever it is, it's masking the real agenda, which is the New World Order, okay, which is technically to subvert humanity with technology, technocracy, to hold on to and cement the corporate power that has been developed since Bretton Woods, since the end of the World War II, which was the New World Order after World War II, but there was also a New World Order before that, after World War I, and then previously in the 18th and 17th centuries, there was another New World Order, but specifically in the 17th centuries, you had this whole idea at the end of the Enlightenment of individual liberty, of people being free to think and do as they please, conduct business as they please. But that sounded great to the populace, the plebes, the poor, the regular people said, yes, we want to be free of monarchical tyranny, which is great. But then they use that for the merchant class to then become the new tyranny. So now that they've established their new corporate tyranny, that now they want to take the individual liberties away from people, or saying it's passé, they don't need it, the Enlightenment was dumb, all this realistic thinking is postmodernism is scientific, has scientific basis, blah, blah, blah. All bullshit. All right, Reuters is reporting Chinese EV giant BYD's fourth quarter profit leaps 73%. Thanks, you Tesla protesters. The China electric vehicle maker BYD jumped 73.1% in the fourth quarter of 2024 to a record 15 billion won. So it's about $2.1 billion. And then also AFP has the same headline. BYD surpasses rival Tesla with record 2024 revenue. And as I mentioned previously, I think some yesterday, but in the previous weeks, is that all the activism against Tesla is undermining an American company versus a Chinese communist company. And people are, they're so worried about Trump with authoritarianism. Go live in China, right? Yeah, you could live a normal life as long as you don't talk against the government or the party. But if you do, you're going to end up in jail, never to get out. Not only that, but your whole family's ability to make a living will be undermined by the party and the central government. So you like that sort of stuff. The people be punished for what they think. You like that idea, right? So in any case, the Shenzhen-based firm has emerged in recent years as a clear leader in China's highly competitive EV market, which is the largest in the world. BYD recorded, I went into this, 1.7 billion in revenue for all of 2024. That figure eclipsed the 97.7 billion in revenue last year announced previously by Tesla. So this is what you don't understand is like, how does China, who's not supposed to be part of the Western power structure, why are they following the same agenda as the West to some degree, particularly in products? So BYD has been the most prolific electric vehicle car maker in the world, and their EVs are everywhere. So you're undermining, the people of the United States are undermining a United States company because they don't like the political views of the CEO and the founder. But meanwhile, they're boosting the sales of a Chinese communist firm, where in communist China, there's real authoritarianism. So in protest of imagined authoritarianism, you're undermining an American company that boosts a Chinese company where there is real authoritarianism. One American News is reporting border czar Tom Homan reveals ICE arrested 370 illegal aliens in Boston this week, which is a sanctuary city. So they're working in sanctuary cities, which is great. Like I said, go after the criminals. I have no problem with going after people that aren't criminals and just here illegally, because they're criminals for doing that. Yeah, I don't. It's always been an American law. You just can't come into the country. And it's not because of the race of the people. It's because especially unskilled, unsponsored people, poor people that have nothing, come to this country, they become an economic burden. That's just the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter. Just the News is reporting Republicans defend, Democrats decry changes at the USPS as losses in 2024 were nearly $10 billion. Talk about a boondoggle. I would agree with privatizing the USPS. It's been losing tens of billions of dollars. There was one year where it almost lost $100 billion. We can't subsidize something that can't work. You know, other companies make it work. Does the mailing system in the United States have to be subsidized to the tune of $10 billion by the taxpayer? I don't think so. The U.S. Postal Service was created in the Constitution. Most people don't know that, but they do know that they can count on their postal service every day, 6 days a week. Said Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois. Now there are those in Washington, he says, Elon Musk and others who want to privatize the Postal Service. He's opposed to that. Well, he's a Democrat. Let's keep it an independent agency above politics. It's not. How much does it cost? So they're losing $10 billion a day. Is that going into your pocket, Dick Durbin? Where is all this money going? Because the bigger the outlay in funds, the more opportunity for skimming or graft. That's without a doubt. So you have to wonder, a federal agency is losing $10 billion a year. Maybe we should just scrap the Postal Service and give that $10 billion to other people. You know, who wouldn't want $1 million or $1 billion? Yeah, I think something has to be done. They either have to fix it or figure out a way to make it work. Fox News is reporting. Stay with me now. We're almost done. Scary AI-powered swarm robots team up to build cars faster than ever. Why we're seeing the rise of AI-powered human-robot swarms. The automotive industry is undergoing a seismic shift driven by the integration of AI-powered humanoid robots into production lines. UB Tech Robotics, in collaboration with Zeekr, has pioneered a groundbreaking initiative where swarms of robots work together to build cars faster and more efficiently than ever before. But is this technological advancement a leap forward toward innovation or a step closer to human replacements? I think it's the latter. I'll just show you a picture here. Because Lutnick said, and other people involved in the technology said, we're only a year away from humanoid robots for domestic commercial purpose. So there they are working. I think this is a test facility. It looks like Amazon, doesn't it, with all the bins? But they're saying that we're only a year away from humanoid robots for your home. They say it would cost about 30 grand, but they haven't even been doing any testing, so it's hard to know. They've been keeping it very hush-hush. I think it's going to be like U.S. robotics in iRobot, where they're just going to, all of a sudden, they're going to be 1 million robots manufactured. Here you go. And there are going to be some problems in the beginning, but obviously I'm not for that. Newsweek, will your health insurance pay out? AI will decide. In the wake of the boom of artificial intelligence, more healthcare insurance companies are using the technology to speed up the process. I'm not going to get too more into this. They're basically having AI do the decision making, and AI courts are not too far away. And really, AI is going to, once the humanoid robots are up, people are going to be astounded of how they supplant the need for humans. A couple of mainstream media articles. AP, concerns about espionage rise as Trump and Musk fire thousands of federal workers. From Russia to China and other adversaries, the upheaval in Washington as Musk's Department of Government Efficiency guts government agencies represents an unprecedented opportunity to recruit informants, national security intelligence experts say. Yeah. More scare tactics from the Associated Press. And there's even more scare tactics. Hold on. Social Security rushing service cuts at White House request, sources say. Oh no. What does Axios say in their scare tactics? These changes will strain the already struggling Social Security system and would even deprive some people of benefits entirely, according to current and former advocates for retirees. But the real issue here is that the Social Security Administration is rushing to cut the phone service. How that's going to deny beneficiaries complete benefits, they don't say. Because some people can't use the phone service. You get a check. You don't have to call every week to get your, or every month to get your check. You just get it. So, and the reason they're cutting the phone service is everything's done online. So now, will that affect people's benefits entirely? They don't say. So, all right, we're running over as usual. All right, Zero Hedge, 7 actions that NATO countries are taking which indicate that something really big is coming and something really bad. France is getting ready to distribute 20-page survival manual. French government is also telling their citizens to leave Iran immediately. It's being reported that military planners in the UK have ordered special force units to be sent to Ukraine. They're already in there. Turkey has announced that it'll be deploying troops to Ukraine if needed. Poland is preparing for a showdown with Russia, conscripting every male adult for military training. The Baltic states are joining constructing massive defense line that includes 600 bunkers, tank stitches, dragon's teeth, and rocket systems. Russia isn't interested in invading Europe. Number 7, in a letter that was delivered to the Iranians, Donald Trump has given it 2 months only to reach a peace agreement, and on and on. Well, that's all good. We all worry about World War III. That's why we need to stop the war in Ukraine. The poking the bear scenario by NATO is just a bad idea all around. It's insane. And then it says Ukrainians are trying to provoke Russians. Oh, this is about the drone attack. And the Ukrainians are not known as a military or intelligence force, or technologically, so we know it's all being done by the West. All right, quickly, the Wall Street Journal. How the CIA's benign cover-up after the JFK assassination gave rise to the deep state conspiracy. President Kennedy's killing. Seeds. Planted the seeds for the belief that the shadowy bureaucrats could be conspiring against the public. Of course they are. The CIA was doing dirty things abroad, and nobody really cared. And then domestic politics became antagonistic to the idea of the CIA, and so they turned their sights inward. And they've been working domestically ever since. They say they don't. And a lot of times they just have to be connected to the FBI, which is, as far as I'm concerned, it's 2 halves of the same brain. Also from the Wall Street Journal, China is ready to blockade Taiwan. Here's how. Beijing's armed forces have bulked up and are practicing isolating the island. We all know that. They're preparing for war. They're at war with the United States and have been for some time already. It's 5th generational war, so it's not really a kinetic war, but they're doing all the things they would like to be doing before a kinetic war breaks out. They're putting sleeper computer viruses in, putting sleeper agents in the United States, and sleeper surveillance around all military industry so they could have the intelligence there. The Chinese are also, in this article by Zero Hedge, who exposes the Chinese rent-a-womb industry in America. And if you didn't know what was going on here, we have long-running underground birth tourism in California, where Chinese nationals pay baby brokers to ensure their children are born as U.S. citizens. So it's a whole, and we knew this has been going on for a long time, and that's one of the reasons Trump wanted to end birthright citizenship, because of industries like this that are taking advantage of that law. It's not, people would lead you to believe that it's about the lonely Guatemalan woman who trudged all the way here to cross the border to have a better life for her family and gives birth here to her kid. That's not what it's about. It's about the Chinese industry here. Musk threatens legal action after former Representative Jamal Bowman calls him a Nazi and thief on TV. This is One American News. And if you didn't know what happened here, Jamal Bowman said that he's incompetent. I don't know how he arrived at that conclusion. He's a thief, he's a Nazi, and people don't trust him. Also from One American News, Harris holds commanding double-digit lead for 2028 Democratic nomination, but she got 36%, well above the second, which was Pete Buttigieg, who only got 10%. So she didn't get an overwhelming percentage. She just got the lead. And Bernie Sanders, who got 5. Zero Hedge again, what happened since judge ruled water fluoridation is lowering IQ. And what we do know is the EPA has to address the unreasonable risk fluoride in drinking water poses to lowering IQ in children has become a tipping point. We all know. I mean, I've been talking about fluoride in the water for years. I think it's less important now that they're getting rid of fluoride lighting because I think they work together. But I'm not going to get into that conspiracy theory right now. How'd we do? A little late. Late. Again, an hour and 10 minutes. I'm trying to eliminate the blather, less analysis, and digression. Excuse me. Well, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Join me tonight around 9:15 for another edition of Tuesdays with Perry. We're finally going to get together and talk about all the things that have come to pass politically in the past couple weeks. Join us for that. Remember, you're under attack biologically, psychologically. Stay hip to the trick, and I'll see you later. Respect.
This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Listen to experiments in ambient soul.
The New World Order. The New World Order.
I kill you!